We recently reviewed Modern Gray by Sherwin-Williams, and today I'm going to give you a palette pyramid utilizing this wonderful color. If you've missed our review, I'll leave it in the cards up top and in the description down below. But essentially, this is a fresh and balanced neutral paint color, a wonderful combination of beige and gray and a little bit of brown, a neutral that gives you a ton of different options depending on your design style. So in today's episode of Palette Pyramids, we're going to go through this whole palette together, and if you don't know what a palette pyramid is, it's essentially our way of arranging paint colors in a top-down fashion, starting with a main color right at the pinnacle, some support colors underneath that are going to be your second most used supporting colors, and then finally you have your finishing colors along the bottom, which can act as accents, whether they're much darker, rich neutrals, or your more saturated colors that have a little bit of fun and pizzazz. ThePaintPeople.com is your go-to destination for quality paint and paint supplies. We're more than just a paint store, we are your partner in bringing color to life. Our commitment to fast shipping ensures that your order will reach you promptly so you can start your project without unnecessary waiting. Visit our website today and discover a world of colors, quality, and convenience. And as a thank you for supporting us on YouTube, use coupon code JAMES5 for 5% off your order. These palette pyramids are meant to be very flexible and interchangeable. All these colors are going to work together, so if you want to switch out a couple finishing colors here and there, you can do so. Don't feel like you need to use all of them, but you can if you really want to. And if you're looking for your own custom palette pyramids, we offer it as a service. If you want to check the description down below, whether you want a 3-color palette, a 6-color palette, or a 9 or 11-color palette, we can do it all for you depending on your project size. So more information down below if you want that. But anyway, let's get into today's palette pyramid utilizing Modern Gray by Sherwin-Williams. This is a color that I really enjoy. I think it's extremely versatile, which is very, very important to me. And because of its versatility, I'm going to put Modern Gray as the main color in this palette pyramid. This is going to be your default choice, your starting color. If you had to pick one color to paint the entire interior of your home, Modern Gray would be it. Everything else is just the seasoning on top. I think with a 62 LRV, this is kind of a happy medium of not too light, but not too dark, which is very, very good depending on whether your rooms get a lot of light or maybe not so much light. Modern Gray will just suit in a lot of cases really, really well. It also acts as a bit of a neutral canvas, which means it's not going to pull focus. Just had a half caffeine coffee. Imagine if I had full. Now, warmer leaning grays can go a number of different ways, but I feel Modern Gray does have that bit of a taupey feeling to it. It doesn't feel like a clear beige. It's more brown leaning, I would say, in its warmth, which is great. It has this earthiness that I really enjoy. And while it could suit a number of different situations, it may not be the perfect choice for a certain room depending on what else is going on, which is why we have other colors that go with it. Starting with our first supporting color, which is an alternative wall color choice, and it's called Oyster White. Now, this is a color that is more of an off-white than a true clean stark white, but what's nice about that added bit of offness is it makes it more appropriate for walls, in my opinion. It gives you a little more coloration, a little more hue coming through. You get more of that taupey, brown leaning warmth, a little bit of a grougey feel, kind of a rougey gray with Modern Gray, but Oyster White brings you a little more cream, a little more of a yellow warmth, almost a touch of a greeny beige as well. I would dare say Oyster White is a bit of a greenish. Bit of a greeny beige, creamy color, more on the off-white side of things. So if you have a part of your home that would really look better with a little more of a traditional yellow leaning warmth rather than a more brown one, Oyster White's a great option. Also, Oyster White about 10 points higher in terms of brightness, so it's going to reflect more light back into the space. So the two neutral wall color options give you some flexibility, both in terms of depth and undertone. The second supporting color is going to be the true off-white of this palette. I would even just call it the white color because this is going to be your option probably for your trim, because traditionally you want to go with a bright white trim, or at least a lot of people do. And I think it's always useful to have a white in every color palette. Just to give you a bright ceiling color, baseboards, doors, frames. You don't have to use white on those surfaces, but most often people do. So Snowbound would be my second support color, which is probably going to be your trim color choice. And I just love it because it has a crispness to it without being overly domineering with how bright or white it is. It has an 83 LRV, so enough contrast where it's going to really look clean against either modern gray or even oyster white, but it has a softness to it that just gives it a delicate feel, which I think is important. So Snowbound is that second supporting color, and really, if you wanted to use it on your walls as well, I'm not stopping you. Just make sure you're not using your trim paint on your walls. That would be a disaster. Okay, so main color done, support colors done. Now let's get into the finishing colors, which is the last tier of the palette pyramid. Now, I want you to think of these colors as the seasoning, the finishing touch to your palette, which means you don't have to use all these colors all at once. You can use one today, maybe another next year or whatever. You can of course mix and match them in the same room, but I just like giving you the most options with those finishing colors so you can really change things up when you want a change. The first one is called Pewter Tankard, and this is going to be a color that is going to be the most neutral feeling of the three finishing colors, although it does have a decent amount of depth with a 33 LRV. So what that means, it's going to reflect less light, which means it's going to absorb more light. It's going to feel darker, a little more rich. It's going to have more body than either modern gray or oyster white, yet it's still within that neutral family of colors. So you're not having to worry about something that's going to jump off the walls based on how vibrant it is. To me, it does feel more like a straight up taupe. So a combination of a darker gray and brown and a little bit of a green undertone, but I do think it's balanced pretty well, which means it's going to be largely dependent on your lighting, whether it goes one way or the other. But I do enjoy its interaction with the other wall colors in this palette. Just kind of splits the difference between modern gray and oyster white, but gives you a lot more depth. So if you have a room where maybe those lighter colors don't really look too hot, just go with something darker like Pewter Tankard to really just stand out and just feel nice and strong. The second finishing color is a little more vibrant, a little more fun. It's called Green Onyx. And this color is technically brighter than Pewter Tankard, but I feel is more of an accent color because it's so saturated with green. This is green enough where I wouldn't call it a neutral. It just feels green, and it has a bit of a warm yellow undertone to make it feel a little more herbal. That's how I sort of think of it. But even with that yellowy warmth happening, it does feel a little bit subdued, just a little bit muted with some gray. So it's probably going to look pretty green next to some of these neutrals we're using. But if you had it next to like pure green, it's a night and day difference. And then finally, the third finishing color is very much complementary to Green Onyx. It's extremely fiery. It's called Spiced Cider. Now, this is a color that is part of the orange family of colors. It does have a red undertone as well, so it's kind of this nice happy medium, clay/coral-esque. I think this is a wonderful accent color alongside modern gray specifically, but also with oyster white and Pewter Tankard. It's going to pop out and be noticeable on its own. When you combine it with Green Onyx, that's the only time you want to be careful about the ratio between the two, because green and red, very complementary, which sounds like, oh yeah, they're very harmonious, but in reality, you want to make sure that you're not having an even dose of both red and green at a large scale, because they will feel really dynamic and polarizing. My advice is, if you're using the green or that clay color, just pick one in a certain space. And if you do want to combine them in the same room, have a little bit of one and then a lot more of the other, rather than a 50-50 split, like 2 walls and 2 walls. That'll be a lot. But like I mentioned earlier, these finishing colors, don't feel like you need to use all of them in the same room, even on the same floor. You can kind of just mix and match here and there strategically. I leave it up to you. The power is in your hands. And if you missed the Modern Gray dedicated review, it's right over here.